Welcome back to the Woodgrafter. Today in this shop I'm going to cut up some wood, in particular these large MDF panels in a small workshop. That sounds interesting? Stick around. Bit of a different type of video today. A number of people have got in touch and said, hey, how do you break down large MDF panels in a small workshop? Just so happens I bought two large MDF panels and I've got to break them down for some projects I've got, both CNC projects and non-CNC projects that just happen to need some MDF. So if you've asked for it and you're interested, I thought I'll show you how I go about doing it. I've actually had problems getting hold of MDF recently. I spoke to my normal supplier, a place just outside of Manchester, and they said, hey, you know, what's going on with the MDF supply? And he said, I'm struggling because of Brexit. The import duties have changed, the laws have changed, the taxation's changed, and he's struggling to actually get his suppliers to supply the stock to him, and he's beginning to get a bit of a backlog in. Now, normally I would wait for him to get his backlog because I want to support my local supplier, but I've got projects mounting up and I've got to get on with them. So I bought some from a place I don't normally use, and guess what it was? Amazon. Amazon.co.uk now sell MDF. Now, if you've got Amazon Prime, the delivery came free, but the panels are more expensive than I would normally get from my normal supplier, about 20% more. I just needed two sheets to get me going, to get the projects moving that I needed to move. Free delivery on that, so it sort of kind of broke even for that small order. Anything more than two, I would actually be overpaying on the price of MDF. But if you don't need an awful lot of it, it's easy to get it delivered to the shop. So the first thing I would say, if you're working in a small shop, as you know that I do, single size garage in width, buy panel sizes that you can easily manage. If you've ever picked up a full sheet of MDF, the full size sheets of MDF, like the 3-odd meter ones, they are heavy. Boy, are they heavy. And as a single person, they're quite hard to maneuver around. So these particular sheets are about 2,440 millimeters long, and they're about 1,220 millimeters wide. So the first thing I do is buy stock I can use and manipulate. Every now and then, if I've got a big project on that needs a lot of panels, I will buy the full 3-meter sheets, but then I don't cut them in the workshop. I lie them down on slats of wood outside the workshop on a flat tarmac area, and I just cut them on my hands and knees with the track saw. But the technique is pretty much the same. Now, I don't know the quality of this MDF, never bought from Amazon before. It seems okay. It came incredibly well packaged. Everything's wrapped up in polythene. There's bubble wrap round the edges, and there's plastic corners on the corners, which in theory should protect it. I've never seen MDF arrive so well wrapped and protected. But that's pretty good. So I'm going to unwrap it, and then I'm going to see the quality that we've got here. So that's that unwrapped, and first impressions are the quality is pretty good. This edge here is quite chewed up and quite damaged, but the corners are well protected, and you can see what I mean by size. So the size I've bought for the workshop here is in proportion to the overall size of the workshop. If I'd got the bigger sheet, it's twice as wide again as this, so you can see the big problems I would have in that. Now there's two sheets here. These are 9mm, so there's two 9mm sheets here. One sheet I want to cut into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces, and then that can go away for easy storage, and that's the perfect size for those sort of cabinet things that I seem to be making for everybody at the moment. But the other one, I also want to cut into 1, 2, 3, 4 sheets, but then I want to cut that into 8 sheets, each sheet being the perfect size to go to the CNC machine for CNC based projects. So I've got two requirements here. Now if you look at the length of this, it's pretty much hard up to this end here where I store my tools. So I've not really got the room to actually rip cut this and take away this factory edge. But that factory edge is good enough for this first cut to use as a reference edge. So I'm going to chop this down into 4 chunks. Cross cut, cross cut, cross cut to give me 4 panels. And then each panel I can come back in and just trim up the edge to make sure it's all nice and square. So the overall length of the panel is 2,440, and I want 4 panels. So each panel, therefore, is going to be 610. So I'll make 4 panels, 610. Now the maximum cutting size of my CNC machine is 750 by 550. This is 1220 wide. So if I go 1220 and divide that by 2 is also 610. So I'll then cut this panel in half, and that's going to give me a square of 610 by 610. I can then trim it down to the 550, and that's going to work perfectly for the CNC projects. So let's start by cutting both of these panels. I'll cut them both at the same time into 4 chunks, 610-ish wide. I've got some scrap MDF pieces here that I'm just going to slide between these MDF panels and my workbench for obvious reasons, I think, because I don't actually want to damage my bench as I cut through these panels. I'm going to pull the panel forward, and that should just give me enough room for the track saw to come in. I use a 1400mm track saw for this, that just fits nicely. I'm going to use my benchdogs.co.uk rail square, and I'm going to use my Festool TS55 track saw. Now if you don't have all this great paraphernalia that I tend to have, you can simply use a square and a straight edge that's long enough. This one will be a bit short, of course, but just square up to the edge of the thing, come in with your straight edge, clamp that down the appropriate position, then just run a circular saw down there, or a track saw, whatever it is that you have. But while I've got the right kit for doing the job, I'll use that. What I normally do, take the tape measure, come along, mark up the 610 there, and then I can just line my track saw with that mark. However, I now have in my shop some of these parallel guides. So what I'm going to try, and not tried this before, is just use a single parallel guide in the middle. I'm going to set this to round about 610. In fact, I'm going to go slightly under. I'm actually going to go 605 on these panels, because that's more than enough for the project that I need, and it will just give me some clean edges on that end of the cut. 605. And now I can just come along, poke my rail down that opening, square up to the edge here, make sure all the panels are lined up, and slide up to that 605 mark. And that should give me a nice square cut at the right width. And that's it, I'm good to go ahead and make my cut. Now the other good thing about putting the scrap MDF under the bench, it gives this a bit more support. So when I put my TS55 at the very end for the cut, this doesn't tip. This doesn't have the tendency to tip as much as it would, so it is supported. If you're not happy with that and you're uncertain about how much that's going to tip, you clamp that edge down over there. All I do, I support this here, I start the cut off, and once you're about here, you're okay, everything's supported. So we now simply make the cut. And there you have the first 2 boards cut down to size. So put those out of the way. And now you can just slide down the rail. And I'll just bring over the parallel guide a bit further so you can now start to see it on the video. Normally I wouldn't bother, of course. But you can now start to see this setup. Just want to readjust the scrap MDF. Just so it supports the material and supports the cut. Square against the edge, parallel guide in place, make the next cut. And then you just rinse and repeat until you get to the end cut. So with those 3 basic cuts, I've now got 8 panels, all 600mm wide, and they're all exactly 600mm wide, so high level of repeatability. And what was that, 1220mm long. So 4 of those panels I'm going to keep now. That's it, that's done. So I'm going to put those under my bench for storage out of the way until I need them. And although not designed in that way, these offcuts make great skids to stop this getting damaged on my concrete floor. So we'll use these. And I want to break these down for the CNC machine, and these are going to be 550 long. Now we know we've got some good edges on this because we've just cut them, so reference edges are fine. And you can see these are now a perfect width to actually work on my bench. So I can now use my cutting station on these to bring them down to the length that I'm looking for, that 550. Perfect. So I'm going to set my gauge to 550. And now I can use the cutting station on my bench to make these final cuts. So that's it, there's my top tips for breaking panels down in a small workshop. Get a panel that's commensurate with the size of your shop. Don't be tempted to buy the bigger ones that you can't move around by yourself and you can't fit it in your shop and can't work around it. Why would you do that? Doesn't make sense. Yes, it's cheaper to buy the bigger panels. However, get one that's right for the size of the project you're doing and the size of workshop that you're working in. Work out your cutting strategy. You see I had 2 panels, one that was going to be in 4 chunks, one that was going to be sized down for my CNC project. Batch cut as much as I could to save me mauling those big panels around any more than I had to do, and also to streamline the process, reduce the time. 3 cuts gave me 8 panels of a good working size for the projects I do. And then I trimmed and fine-tuned the final panel down to 2 sizes commensurate with the CNC machine and a project I'm going to work on this afternoon. If you're interested in the kit that I use, the parallel guide system, the rail square, the fence and the flags that are on my bench are all from benchdogs.co.uk. Check them out, really great stuff. I've done loads of reviews on their products, and if you want to buy any of that stuff, use the code thewoodgrafter at checkout for a 5% discount. So I hope you found that useful. I hope that answered the questions of how do I manage large panels in a small space. Nothing else to say. See you soon on the Woodgrafter. Take care.